Hi, this is Tony Byrne. Welcome to this week's show of Money Demystified, the show to make your money grow. Every Tuesday at 5 p.m. here on Spectrum on Air, the colour of radio. This week's subject is everything property investment related. We have a very special guest this week, John Howard. I'd just like to introduce John Howard to our show today. I've met John once before in a previous video meeting. John runs a highly successful property business, has been doing it for 4 decades, and just seems just as passionate today as ever. So without any further ado, John, may I just ask you a bit about your background, how you grew up, where you grew up, your family, your education. Can you tell us a bit about your background, first of all?
Yeah, hi Tony. It's great to be on your show. Absolutely. So I was born in Felixstowe, and I was very fortunate because my grandfather and grandmother had a shoe shop in Mansfield, in Nottinghamshire, and my grandfather just after the war, my grandfather had 2 boys come into the shop, and he was so impressed with these 2 schoolboys who went to Gresham School in Norfolk Public School, that he vowed that he would save enough money for his only daughter's children to go to private school. So he set a trust up, and he managed to save enough money along with my grandmother, who had her own shoe shop as well, which is unusual in those days. They both had shoe shops, to save enough money for all 3 of us, his grandchildren, their grandchildren, to go to private school. So I was very fortunate that I had the benefit of a normal middle-class upbringing, if you like, in Felixstowe. But I had the benefit of going to a top public school, which is highly unusual, I think, probably in those days. And nowadays, you probably could never do it because the cost of it is so great. But all three of us went to private school.
Excellent. And what was the name of that school?
Gresham. So I went to Gresham's in North Norfolk, and I struggled at school academically. I stammered. I had quite a bad stammer to the age of about 19. But when I was 17, academically I didn't do very well. But my father was a greengrocer in Felixstowe, and then when he was 60 odd, he decided he wanted to be an estate agent. So he bought an estate agent's business, just a one-man band. In those days, you could do that. And when I was 17, I left on my 17th Christmas time, on my 17th birthday, to join him because I could learn to drive then. And he'd been very ill in hospital, and there was no real business left. So we sort of started from scratch, and I really didn't know what I was doing, as you can imagine. And he wasn't the best estate agent. He was a very good greengrocer, but of course everyone knew him as a greengrocer, not as an estate agent. So it was a bit of a strange. It was a bit of a strange move, but he didn't need the money particularly either, which didn't help. But I think you learn far more when you enter into a business that's struggling than you do a business that's doing well. Anyone can do okay if you're going into a successful business to a point, but if you're going into a struggling one, you learn far, far more.
So have you adopted that policy throughout your life? Because what I've found in my life, and I try to preach this to my stepchildren today, is that the best learning is through mistakes, and just being thrown in at the deep end. You learned a lot, did you not, John?
I learned an awful lot, and after 4 months, I mean, I didn't like answering the phone because of my stammer, and I would never make a phone call, so it wasn't the best start. But after 4 months, my father went back into hospital, and I was left to run the business on my own with a secretary who called Mrs. Leader. And Mrs. Leader used to give me spelling lessons, spelling tests every morning, first thing. It was just bizarre and she couldn't believe that because I'd been to a private school, I couldn't spell better. So it was just bizarre. And then he came out when I was 8. He came out again, and I'd started running the business on my own. I mean, we had in those days, you had a bit of small insurance brokers with it, and you had rentals. So, yes. You learn an awful lot. And in the end, he came back, and I had all different ideas to him, and my mother, bless her heart, was the one who was separating us at lunchtime from arguing with each other, because in those days, of course, you locked the office and you went home for lunch. You walked home for lunch.
I do remember.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing. You probably remember those days, Tony. Not many of your listeners probably do. And then what happened was, on my 18th birthday, I'd met he had a client, two property developers who were very successful. And in those days, it was the first time that you could really sell converted flats and get mortgages on them. Yes. Through building societies. So these guys were going around buying these big blocks of flats in all these sort of seaside towns and selling them off individually. And they'd done this, and they'd done this on one block, and they had two sitting tenants left. And in those days, a lot of sitting tenants where you couldn't get them out, and you always pay 50% of vacant possession value. And I managed on my 18th birthday to buy two properties off them in the freehold of this building. Yeah. And my father wouldn't lend me any money because he didn't want me to lose it, which is fair enough, I suppose. My mother, bless her heart, lent me a little bit. And the bank manager in those days, it's nice that I don't even know who my bank manager is now, but in those days, you go and see him, and he sat down and said, well, you're very young and all this, but anyway, he lent me the money. And I basically sold the first property before the day I completed. I'd already sold the first property, the first one, to the tenant for not the full vacant possession price because they were a tenant, but 25% more than I was paying, 30% more than I was paying for it. So I virtually got all my money back. Yes. Which left me with the second one, and that was already got me started. And of course, I gave the money back to my mother with a profit, and she bought a new kitchen with it because my father was too tight to buy a kitchen. A new kitchen. So she said, I don't need your money now, I'm going to buy my own kitchen. So and then of course the great thing, if you my advice to people, we talk about joint ventures later, I'm sure, in the show, but yes, the great thing about it, I always say to people that whether you're borrowing the money from your family or you're lucky enough to be able to do that or not, treat them as if it's an arm's length transaction, and give them the interest you'd give someone else, because that way they'll lend you the money again. It's not just a favour. And also, if you've got siblings, they're not going to be annoyed with you because you've managed to borrow the money, and all the rest of it, because they'll see a benefit in the long term of mum and dad having a bit more money. So that's what happened. And then we moved on, and that's got me started. So, I had a very privileged start in many ways. In as much that, from the age of 10, all the way through, we sat at the dinner table talking, my father would say, my mum was, how's the shop today, or whatever. And all that rubs off on you. And I think the shame of today is that not many people sit down in the evening or lunchtime and actually sit down and have dinner together. And all this rubs off on children. Yeah. The struggles of being self-employed and the successes. And, I used to cycle round when he bought the business. I used to sign the holidays and things, and I used to get 50 pence for telling him where a for sale board was and things like that. And then he'd go and knock on the door and try and get it to sell. So,
Well, you would knock on the door yourself when you were a kid? Or he would?
Yeah, so I used to cycle around. Yeah, I used to cycle around and doing that and holding the tape for my dad when he was measuring a property up. And
who actually called on? It wasn't you calling on the people because you were just a kid.
No, I did the easy bit, Tony. Yeah, I just told him where they were, and he went and tried to get them for sale. Yeah.
John, I absolutely love all that. I just think it's a great way of teaching kids how to get on in life. And what I thought was very interesting, I like the fact you didn't go to university. I like the fact you had to go straight into business, because you've learned through a university of life, and I feel that's far more important.
Well, I have, Tony, but to be fair, I wouldn't have been able to go to university anyway, because in those days, don't forget, these days you get a prize for coming last, don't you, in life? Sadly, in a way, and sports day and things like that. In those days, it was, you're not bright enough to go to university, and not that many of my friends, even who were quite bright, not many of them went to university. A lot of them just went straight into. They went to London and got a job, some doing something, and they morphed into something else, and most of them were successful. So university's great, I think, for certain things. I don't know if you want to be a doctor, a doctor or a lawyer or what, you obviously need to go to university on the whole. But I think for a lot of other industries, I'm not sure it's necessary. And I'm pleased to see that certainly accountants now, they do this scheme, don't they, where you train on the job, if you like, and get paid. and get your qualification, which I think is in many ways a much more sensible route forward for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think that the thing that I find frustrating is that everyone has to succeed these days in education. Everyone has to pass the exam. 97% pass rate for A-levels. It's a complete joke. In the real world, everyone doesn't succeed. There's successes and failures. And I feel that errors or mistakes are punished, whereas you should encourage that, because you only learn through your mistakes, surely.
Well, I totally, Tony. I mean, I've learned far more from the mistakes I've made in property than from my successes. And the problem is, you have to be big enough and broad shoulders enough to take the criticism when you get it wrong, and learn from that. And I think that so many people are so protected these days. I mean, I remember not wanting to go away on holiday with my parents when I was about 13. I think last time I went on holiday with my parents. These days, and I'm not criticising it particularly, because it's nice to have a better relationship maybe, or different relationship with your parents than I had with mine, and probably you had with yours. But I mean, the problem is that there's so much nannying going on. They're maturing, especially boys, men. They're maturing much later than we did, Tony. They're pampered by the parents. They're driven everywhere by the parents. The parents are always involved in their social life. They go on holiday with the parents to God knows what age, and you just think, well, it's all a bit, it never happened to us. We were out there working and doing things and getting on with it,
John, I couldn't agree more. And I think it looked like you're successful for a reason. You had although you had a middle-class upbringing.
Yeah, I was privileged, absolutely.
You were privileged, but you recognise that, and it's quite tough being thrown in the deep end. So I think you've done extremely well on the back of it and learned a lot. John, do you believe, I read this once, do you believe in leveraging other people's time, money and skills?
That's an interesting question, isn't it? I suppose I've had a backer. I mean, I've got one or two of my financial backers I've had 30, 35 years. And, I'm still friends with them now. I can still ring them up and say, look, I've got this. Do you want to have a deal with, do you want to invest in it or whatever? Yeah. So, but the joint venture sort of partners have changed over the years, and it's different to how it was in the past. It's very different, Tony.
Yes. But of course, we'll kind of come on to this in the next part of the show, the joint venturing, which is where you're leveraging other people's money. I think you agree. And what we mean by leveraging is using other people's time, money, skill, which the most successful people in my experience in life have managed to do that, particularly at the outset. So, John, I just thought it'd be quite interesting to do something different in one of these interviews and to ask you something a bit more about you and your personal life. So how do you relax or switch off, if you ever do?
Well, I learned from very early age to try to switch off. And it's a skill in itself, Tony. So,
yes.
When I got to 18 years old, I did my first property deal. And then by 19, my father had been ill again, seriously ill again, and he wanted to sell the business. So he ended up getting someone to buy it, I think, for £5,000. He sold business or something, £6,000 by memory or something crazy low. And the guy who was buying it wanted to keep me on as manager. And I thought, well, he wants to keep me on as manager at 19, which I was 19 there. I should probably be buying it myself. But I always wanted to become a property developer. So after about 2 months of being an estate agent at 17, I realised it's not a mug's game by any means, but the real money is buying and selling, and that's what I've always wanted to do. So I got to 19, the business, the deal fell through with the guy who was going to buy my father's business. So I said to him, look, I'll have a deal with you on it, and I'll buy it off you. And he didn't want to sell it to me because he didn't want me to fail, which is, understandable. But again, my mum stepped in, bless her heart. She's still alive at 94. She stepped in and said, look, let him have a go. So and I didn't look back really with the business. So I changed the name because it didn't have the best reputation. So I changed the name, and I managed to double the turnover, which wasn't hard, by the way, the first year, Tony. And then I doubled it again the second year. I brought in some new ideas. We made it all self-service, which was quite unusual for those days. Yes. And we had colour colour photographs on the brochures, which was all new. And again, it was all new. You used to have to send them off to be printed, and you used to come back 2 days later. A van used to drop them off, and all sorts of funny things had to happen. Those so different now, isn't it? But anyway, I started a newspaper once a quarter to send around to people with the properties I had in, and I got advertisers to cover the cost of it. So, I did all those things, and it was fun times. But of course, it's pressure, and you have to learn to deal with pressure. And there's a lot. It's very important that you can deal with the pressure. If you can't deal with the pressure, then certainly being in business is very difficult. And for me, I do a lot of walking with the dog. I ride horses, play a bit of tennis. I now do a bit of cycling on a Sunday. My relationship I've got a love-hate relationship with cycling, although we do or have been going away about 8 or 9 of us for 5 or 6 days abroad once a year cycling, which is mentally really good because I never take a watch. And I never know where I'm going. I just let everyone else decide, and I just follow them. So all that, I've always been a delegator. So I've never worried about, I've always tried to surround myself with people brighter and better than me. They may not have the balls I've got to do the deals, but if they had, they'd be, they wouldn't be working with me. They'd be doing it all for themselves. So I've always tried to surround myself with the best people I can. And that helps with pressure, obviously, because the better the people are. And the difference between, working with someone who's very good and working with someone who's average is not a lot more money quite often. And there's a saying in horses, and we've got a lot of horses here and all the rest of it. There's a saying in horses, and that is, it costs the same to feed a good horse as it does a bad one. So, at the end of the day, surround yourself with the very best people.
John, I couldn't agree more. It's absolutely brilliant what you're saying, and of course, what you talk about is leveraging people's skills.
Absolutely, because their skill set's far better than mine, probably. But I have the ability, hopefully, to pull it all together to make that decision. Someone's got to be the captain of the ship at the end of the day.
You've got the entrepreneurial spirit, and you're not. Although you and I and other business people do have a lot of pressure, we're able to cope with it, and that's important because not everyone can cope with the pressure.
No, I agree, and that's quite often why they do what they do.
John, you mentioned your mother quite a few times, and it seems to me she has been incredibly supportive of you, even when you were a very young man. I mean, how has that shaped you, do you think?
Yeah, well, I think to be honest with you, I think, in many ways my father was as well. My grandfather, obviously, and grandmother were incredibly important. Otherwise, I don't think I'd have achieved what I've achieved. It's not about just, having a good education isn't just about the education. It's all about the people you meet and the mentality they have and the mentality your family have. And I admire people who really haven't had that luckier start in life and who have really genuinely made it totally, utterly on their own, because that takes some doing.
I agree.
And I take my hat off to them. I really do. And my mother's always been very supportive. And now with my stepchildren, I've tried to do the same. And I think it's important. I do these seminars. I don't do loads of seminars because I'm really busy, but the ones I do, I tend to put the money towards my grandchildren's education. And try and use it for that purpose. It gives me a purpose and motivation to do them.
I like that. Really good spirit, John. So moving on to today, I really appreciate what you told us about your upbringing and how you've learned to get on. I think it's very, very valuable lessons there. Tell us a bit more about your current ventures. You have this joint venture property company, don't you? Can you tell our listeners what you mean by joint venture? Because not everyone is a property investor.
I've had my main business partner. We've worked together for over 30 years, and he announced last year that he wanted to retire. Said he'd had enough of me after 30 odd years, which probably I don't blame him. I'm not ready or prepared to retire. So I knew a guy. I've known him for 25 years, called Christian Burrows, who runs a company called IP Capital. And Christian was very successful. He had a hedge fund, very successful. And he came to me last year, and it just sheer coincidence said, "Look, John, would you like to work with me? Would you like to form a company with me and have a bond on the European stock market?" So I said, "Well, I don't really know much about it, but yeah, I'd love to." He said, "What would you like to do with the money we raise, property-wise? Would I'm happy to do whatever you really want with the money." And I said, "Well, what I'd really like to do is joint ventures with other people, because there's lots of young, aspirational, not all young to be fair, but aspirational property developers who can't get into development because they haven't got the deposit required to get on and do the deals." So he said, "Okay, that's quite an interesting concept." So that's really where it all morphed out from. So what we do is we raise money on the European stock market with my bond. It's a listed bond, and then we use those funds to invest in our own deals as well, because I'm doing deals together. I'm still very active, but also to support first-time developers, mainly first-time developers, by investing the deposit into their company that they don't have, or the junior debt as it would be called, and then we help oversee the project with them. So we organise a senior debt, or they can themselves. We put in the junior debt, and then we oversee the project with them. We have full-time surveyor, legal team, and so on, to make sure that the project's successful, because we're their partners, and we share the profit 50-50 with them. And this is because banking has changed over the years, and funding's changed, and none of these clearers now, clearing banks, really lend on property to any great extent, unless you've got an awfully long relationship with them. So the modern property lending banks will lend 100% of the build costs if the deal's good enough, yes, and 60%, say, of the purchase price. So we put in the 40%. Yes. The bank basically do the rest, and that's enabled us to do these joint ventures and support first-time developers, and it's going relatively well. I wanted to spend 10 million this year on supporting new developers, and we haven't got to that level. We've done about 5 joint ventures, and I hope to do 20, and by the end of the year I think we would have done 10 or 12. So a bit of a slow start, but we were learning the suite of documents for the joint venture, and everything else has to be. So we gave it a bit of a soft launch, if you like, and now we're pushing on. We've got the website, and John Howard Joint Venture website, and also
your website, John.
John Howard Joint Venture Fund.co.uk. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and it's all very self-explanatory on there. But also, what I've also linked it with is a new property show that I do, which I've come up with, called the Property Graduate, and what we're doing there. So that's sponsored. That's sponsored by the Joint Venture Fund, and it's similar to The Apprentice. And the winner gets to have a property company with me, 50-50, with no risk or personal guarantees, and I invest £1 million into that property for them to do their first deal with me, and a further £1 million to develop it. And
you're almost like an Alan Sugar type, are you?
Basically, yeah. I'm investing more than Alan Sugar does, though. So yeah, and we've got our last day of filming. We're down to the last 3. We've got our last day of filming on Monday, and then I'll have a new partner, which is quite exciting. And the three finalists are all aspirational, very clever, very young, well, relatively young, clever people.
John, what I do like about you is you're not just in it for making money, are you? You do like helping younger people. That's been a theme throughout, and I really admire you for that. That's a really good spirit, John. So on that note, now I'd just like to ask you some questions about, first of all, about your own life. How do you envisage your life panning out over the next 10 years and beyond?
Well, Tony, I can't believe that I'm 59 years old. I really can't believe it. I don't know where the time's gone. I've had a fantastic time. I could have done better. I've had a reasonable career. I could have done better. Lots and lots of people are hugely more successful than me in property. However, uniquely, I think, to a lot of people who have done some bigger deals. I mean, our last big deal was 27 million, build 150 flats. I also do small deals as well, and most of the bigger developers tend to just do bigger developments. So I'm very happy to buy a flat for £100,000 that I can sell for 150. So that's quite unique in itself, and I think that's where I ended up writing a book, and I've written 2 more, and I've got another one coming out shortly about property, because I just felt that people weren't getting the right education, the right guidance. I mean, there's some very good people around, but there's some pretty shocking ones as well who are giving this advice, and most of who are doing very little. But the market has changed completely. So in your day, Tony, my day, when we started, you could only borrow 50% on property, for instance. Now there's all this special gearing, and the joint venture fund that I do now allows someone to put virtually no money in, if any money at all in, apart from perhaps stamp duty, in order to develop their first deal, which is amazing. So there's some very good things that have happened in the property industry. But what it has done, there are thousands and thousands of more people who want to get involved in it, which makes it much harder to find deals. I mean, it isn't easy to find deals. I spend my life, and I've dedicated my life almost really for the last 40 years to find property deals. And every day I'm searching for property deals. Interesting, what's happening now is I'm tending to find the deals that I think are good, and then I sort of pass them out to my potential joint venture partners rather than do them myself, because I want to feed the business, if you like. But the whole industry has changed dramatically, in prop tech as well. We've just finished filming the 3rd series of Property Elevator. Yesterday I did 3 days filming, and so interesting that everyone comes in now with the analysis done by a prop tech company. They pull it off the internet. It's all very detailed about the area, about the employment in that area, about all sorts of things, average sale prices and all the rest of it. Now all that is fine, Tony, but ultimately you still need to get your hands dirty. You still need to ring the agent. You still need to go and look at the property and make your own mind up, because all these things are just an average. And what I find is with the new breed of property developer and investor, a lot of them are just so internet savvy, if you like. They really perhaps don't look into the old-fashioned ways of doing things. And I think what's important in property, and I know it has changed dramatically over the last few years, but it is important to keep the old methods which work and combine them with the new methods, rather than just throw out everything that used to happen and do it all the new way. But I think in the next 10 years, the housing market in the UK, there's a massive shortage of housing still. We are due a bit of a property recession in the next few years. Whether that's going to happen with interest rates so low, I mean, you and I expect your first house mortgage, Tony, probably was a 10% mortgage. House mortgage. Paying
15.4%.
Yeah. I mean, 10% was the average, I think.
Yes.
Up till 15 years ago, 10% was the average for the last 40 years or something, before then. And people just don't realise. And I say, when I speak at these seminars and stuff, I take a bit of stick off some of the younger members of the audience normally, because I say to them, they all go, oh, it's so difficult to get on the housing ladder. I said, listen, you guys have never had it so good. You're paying virtually no interest rate at all. If your parents are, if you have the benefit of parents who can lend you a little bit of money, they probably will. And not everyone can. I do appreciate that. You've also got, 95% mortgages guaranteed by the government. You've got Help to Buy scheme. What more on earth? No other country in the world, no other government in the world subsidises property like we do in the UK. Right. And it's a fantastic market. And I appreciate our generation has benefited from property inflation more than perhaps, our parents or so on. But I mean, property prices, new builds going up, new build costs going up all the time, especially at the moment. But there is a massive housing shortage because so many people want to live in this fantastic country of ours. And a lot of them, 60% of them, 65% want to be homeowners.
I totally agree, John. I think it's too easy for British people to do down this country. I think it's a great country.
It's a absolutely fantastic country. And of course, the government, the Conservative government, which I'm a little bit close to as a donor, and I've been the chairman of the Conservatives in Ipswich and other things. I'm now president. I think they make you president when you get old, by the way, Tony. I've learned that one. But I mean, the government know that the more people that buy a property, the more people will vote Tory. And that's one of the reasons under a Conservative government why they make housing priority, try and make it a priority, because they know. And when you're canvassing for the elections and so on, it's the modern housing estates that vote Tory. It's not. It's interesting. It's not really the big houses in the city centres. A lot of those people are liberal. Whether they're embarrassed about having money or not, I don't know. But a lot of those are liberal, or even Labour at times. Yes. Which, the champagne socialist is the worst type of socialist in the world, in my view.
Yes.
If you're going to be a socialist, that's fantastic. Good luck to you. But if you make a lot of money, you should be giving it away, not keeping it.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. Well. Hypocrisy is abundant around the world, isn't it?
For sure, that's for sure.
So I just, you touched on earlier, your business partner of 30 years retired, and you didn't blame him. But it doesn't sound to me like you have any intention of retiring for the foreseeable future. And that's something I would share with you. But is that true, do you think? Do you think you're just keeping that in mind about it? Because it sounds like you really love what you do. Why would you give up what you're doing?
What I would say, Tony, is the joint ventures and things like that, and writing the book and doing some TV work and so on has really given me a bit of a new lease of life. I've always been enthusiastic. I've always been driven. I'm busier now than I've ever been.
Yes.
It's a new era, if you like. It's a new page in my career in many ways. I'm loving it. I've been a director of Cambridge United Football Club for 18 years. That's one way I used to we're talking about taking pressure off and so on. But that was a different type of pressure when you can't pay the wages at the end of the week when you're a football club. But and then I train racehorses at home here as well. So I've done other things as well. But property's always been the mainstay of everything I've ever done, one way or the other. And with my business partner retiring after 30 odd years, I don't blame him. He's an accountant and he never worked as an accountant, but he's an accountant by qualification. And he's been a great partner for me, my main partner. I've had other joint venture partners as well, but he's been my main one. And we bought Auction House UK together. We bought Fine & Country in Norfolk together. We've done many, many deals together, including the last big one, the 150 flats.
That's really good, John. So bearing in mind a lot of changes, a huge number of changes to legislation affecting both commercial property and residential property in recent years. Commercial, I'm thinking more of the planning laws, but also the pandemic, reducing occupancy rates, all the changes of buy-to-let. So with all those challenges, what do you think are the best opportunities for property investing in the future? Should it be commercial or residential, or is that just simplistic? What do you think is the best opportunity?
I think that's a bit simplistic. I think if you've got a really good job, I'm working with a couple of footballers at the moment with my I don't do much mentorship because I haven't got the time to do it, but I do a little bit. And I've got two footballers, and they're buying a house every 4 months. So, and they've said, we want to do developing. I said, you don't want to do developing. I said, you're young, you're training all the time, you're doing this, doing that. I said, when you retire, then you can start doing that. But why are you earning that much money? They can buy a property every 4 months. In fact, one of them could buy one every month, but the other one every 4 months. So when they've got that sort of money, and if you've got a successful business and you're working in that business, then buy-to-let is a great way of passive investing. It's a bit boring, but if you've got spare money, keep buying them, rent them out, just keep doing it. By the time you're, if you time you're 30, 35, 40, you might have 5, 10, 15, 20 of them. Then if you want to change jobs or give the job up because it's too stressful or something, you can do. So I think the buy-to-let market The buy-to-let's great for people who have got a good income,
Yes.
and so on. If you haven't got a good income and you want to create an income so you can give your job up, there's one or two decent educators out there that can train you how to do that. I'm not really one of them, to be honest with you. I tend to work with people with a bit of money, who want to mainly perhaps already got some property but want to drive it forward and push on and do bigger deals.
Okay.
And I think it just depends the sort of person you are. You know, there's people that come on my seminars who I say to them afterwards, look, you're not really suited to be doing this. You're far better to be an investor in someone else's deals and do it that way than you are potentially, trying to be at the front, at the coal face yourself. So I think it depends what interests people and what they want to do and how and whether they worry about things. You said worrying and risk and reward and all the rest of it. It does depend on the type of person, I think.
Okay. John, we're coming very close to the end of the show. I found it so fantastic.
That's gone a bit quick, hasn't it, Tony?
For another hour.
It's gone a bit quick.
It's been brilliant, and I'd really look forward to speaking to you again.
Thank you.
John. It's been a really, really enlightening show. I really, really appreciate your time, and I wish you very well in the future. And I'd like to speak to you personally about a property development. I'd like to some advice on.
Yeah, so, very happy to help you, Tony. You know that.
So best of luck, John. Bye for now. Time for our usual risk warning. This show is for general information only and is not intended to be individual advice. You are recommended to seek competent professional advice before taking any action.